Hello and welcome to my channel where it's Halloween all year long. My name is Lauren. Welcome. I'm so excited to talk all things books today. I have my stack right here of books that I've gotten through in the month of June as well as July. So rather than the typical star rating folks on BookTube typically give to each book, I thought it'd be kind of fun to rank them in comparison to each other and kind of shake things up a little bit. Overall, looking back at the books I read in June and July, I thought it was a super successful summer filled with spooky vibes. I loved getting back into reading after finishing my graduate program. It was 3.5 years of pure history books, basically reading one book a week and having to talk about it, write about it, get it in, get out. That was basically my reading experience. So June and July was a nice refresher, a nice way to explore and think about what do I actually like as a reader as opposed to being forced to read certain things. So really my goals with reading in June and July was to just have all the spooky vibes, explore the genre of horror, of thrillers, of mysteries, and just kind of get reacquainted with a reading routine. So I was really happy with the outcome of it all. And huge shout out to my library, which is where the bulk of these books come from. I'm not a big purchaser of fiction books, and I'm not somebody who typically rereads books. I think there's a few books that are fiction that I would read, but I think, the majority of my books on my bookshelf here are nonfiction, which I use to reference or create lesson plans with, as I am a high school history teacher. Let's get into the books, shall we? Starting off with the lowest ranking here is going to be The Horseman by Christina Henry. So this book is very confusing because it was categorized as horror, and yet I don't think it was really deserving of that title. I guess maybe I'd refer to it as like historical fiction. Like I wouldn't even put it in the category of thriller. So it's really kind of confusing. This book follows 14-year-old Ben. There's a lot of discussion in this book about Ben wanting to dress as a boy and constantly being told no, and that not being really reaffirmed until quite later into the book. We're just kind of following a 14-year-old boy and seeing their relationship to this mysterious horseman that we actually don't really find out who they are until later. We do have another supernatural creature that is a part of this story too, but I don't really feel like I was interested and invested in the story, and I don't really feel like there was a lot going on. This is why I kind of put this as my least enjoyed book of the summer. It really did feel like it should be categorized as more like a young adult book, and maybe it was, and I didn't really catch that, but it does not really feel like an adult's horror novel, especially in comparison to the other books I read prior to this one. Okay, so the next book I read this summer, as I was trying to get spooky, bringing those spooky vibes, is The 7 Visitations of Sydney Burgess by Andy Marino. This is his first try at a horror novel, and I feel like in many ways he succeeded, and then in some ways I did not really find super enjoyable, which is why I kind of ranked this one second to last here. Sydney Burgess becomes possessed after getting assaulted in her home during a perceived robbery gone wrong, and you learn how that impacts her life, her boyfriend, her son, all these relationships, and you really see some secrets being revealed about Sydney, and do you trust her as a narrator, do you not? Like it's really interesting, and those are some parts that I really enjoyed about this story. I really did feel like the first part of this book was super strong. A lot of tension was being built, a lot of suspense. I really do find the main character, Sydney, to be super interesting, and that's ultimately what kept me reading and wanting to keep turning the pages, because there were some points where I just was not feeling super interested in the horror elements that were being offered in this book. But Sydney Burgess is a really interesting character, and I do really like his writing style. I think he's a phenomenal writer, and he really speaks to the addiction experience in very profound and visceral ways. If you're somebody who has a history or any kind of trigger when it comes to addiction, you probably want to steer clear from this book, because that is a huge component of the plot, and then also the characterization of Sydney. And I also like the time jumps. I thought that added a lot of suspense, and it got us thinking about who the people really are. I did not understand what she was talking about and experiencing when it came to the possession. And there was like a name that she referred to the aspect of her that was being possessed, and it was kind of funny to me, like kind of silly. So I didn't really take it seriously the way he was describing Sydney when she was being possessed and how she referred to that like entity. If you already have a history of possession novels under your belt, then this might be something a little bit different. So expect to not fall down that same rabbit hole of possession stories when you pick this up, because you might be a little bit disappointed. Number 6 here is going to be Fragments of Horror by Junji Ito. This is my first experience with any kind of manga at all, but also like this is a horror graphic novel that I picked up in San Francisco when I was there this past summer visiting a friend of mine. We went into this really cute bookstore and I asked if they had anything relating to the horror genre, and the worker, she recommended this book here because she was also really into horror as well, and so she recommended this and I just kind of took a leap here. I was very pleasantly surprised with what a graphic novel can do. This book is disturbing. This book is uncomfortable. This book is silly. This book is disgusting. It's so many things because there's so many different stories, and I was really surprised to find the short story on grief. I ranked this one as my 6th book on my list of spooky summer reads, not because I don't think it was good, but I think that it was limiting because they are short stories, but I think it was a really good introduction to this author, and I'm excited to pick more of his works up. Moving along here to my 5th book of the summer, and that is going to be My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. So if you've already seen my vlog on this, you already have a good understanding of how I feel about this book. Overall, I really like this book. It gave me a great opportunity to watch some slasher films, and it really captivated me in unexpected ways too. The main character, Jay Daniels, of this book is an epic slasher film fan. She finds herself in the middle of a slasher film and mayhem ensues, except the film is not a film, it is a reality. Her town is dealing with a lot of serial murders, and although the pacing of this book I think is more of a slower burn, and then at the end, I'm talking the last 50 pages, are very fast-paced and very violent, I do feel like the characterization in this book is its strongest point. Jay Daniels is very interesting. She's very confusing too, but in really good ways. Like, she's complicated. Do we trust her? Do we see her as a villain? Do we see her as the good guy? Like, it's all these things that really kind of pull at you, and they are unfolding in front of you, which I think makes you continue to read. And I guess she's kind of the story here. Like, she's the plot. Her development as a character is central to this story, and I think it was really fun read. And honestly, like, I would read it again. I don't think it was like bad in any way. I just don't think it was as action-packed as I was hoping it would be. The 4th book on this list is another Stephen Graham Jones book, and that is The Night of the Mannequins, which is actually the book that I kickstarted my spooky summer readathon with. I listened to this one on audiobook, and it's a novella. It follows a group of young people. They're just about to graduate high school. They're moving on with their lives. And they have one last good joke with this mannequin that they found like many summers ago in like a random swamp. And they're always playing pranks with each other in this friend group. And so they play a prank on one of their friends who works at a movie theater. And one of the boys thinks he sees something, and because he thinks he sees something, he does a lot of terrible things. And it's very shocking. If you like body horror, then this will be your cup of tea for sure. If you don't, steer clear of this book, because I was shocked and also enthralled at the same time, because you just don't know what this main character is going to do. And the ending itself is also kind of ambiguous, but also you do get a little bit of closure, so I think it's a good blend. My 3rd book of the summer is going to be The Sundown Motel. The funny thing about this book is that I did not actually really care for it all that much when I finished it. Immediately after, I was thinking, wow, that is so slow, wasn't even all that supernatural, wasn't enough, didn't give me enough, all of that. But as I kind of let it simmer a little bit, because I did read this at the start of the summer, I really did begin to appreciate it. It is a slow burn, and it does have lightweight supernatural elements. Like, it's not this like slasher of a book, but it is mysterious, and it did kind of keep me awake at night. So it did give me those like kind of creepy vibes where I was a little afraid to go to bed at night, but I think means an author is doing their job. So the Sundown Motel follows two people. We have dual narrative timelines, and they're related to each other. So you have Carly and you have Viv, and you have different time periods where they are kind of exploring the same topic. So it also got confusing at times because it was really hard to figure out who was finding out which pieces of information, because there is a mystery and both of them are trying to solve mysteries that are related to each other. So that would be a little confusing at times for me, like who had discovered what piece of information, and it was kind of repeated multiple times, so it seemed a little bit redundant. I also didn't feel like for the supernatural elements within this book that there was enough going on with that. But where Simone St. James really succeeded is making the motel its own character. I felt like I could smell the cigarette smoke from my home. Like, it just had a vibe, it had an atmosphere, and you really did feel the isolation of this motel out in the middle of nowhere. You felt that chilling feeling, somebody was watching you and you just didn't know what was gonna happen, like anything could come out at any point in time. So that feeling I thought was really effective in creating an experience, an atmosphere, which is a huge draw for me when I read books. Like, I wanna escape, I wanna feel a thrill and the safety of my own home, and I think this book did a really good job, although it was kind of limiting in its pacing. I do think if you want something slower and you just want to like kind of immerse yourself in a spooky vibe, I think this book is perfect for you. My second book here is Beneath the Stairs by Jennifer Fawcett. This is another book that had all the atmospheric vibes, and again, you also have a place-based story. Just like with the last one with Simone St. James, you had the motel that was super central to the story. Here you have the Octagon House. So this is a haunted house story. I love the haunted house trope. Like, my favorite ride is the Haunted Mansion. I'm wearing Haunted Mansion earrings. So I am a huge sucker for a Haunted Mansion story. So Beneath the Stairs is another dual timeline story, except you have primarily the same narrator, although you do get another person's perspective, which I think is perfect. It was well done because it gave you insight into a different time period. And so you also have dual time periods of the same person experiencing their life and their relationship to this house. One when she's a child, another one when she's older, which is supposed to be like the present time. So you really don't know in this book what's real, what isn't. I like that questioning of like, wait, was that a supernatural element, or was there just some confusion, or was somebody imagining things? And that's what this book really brought to. I love that mind trip. This book gave me more like thriller mystery vibes than a horror novel, but you do have those supernatural elements, but they're light. It's like a light supernatural overlay to this book. This book gave me those atmospheric vibes, and you're just curious to know, what is the story behind this house? Is it just an old house with a lot of like folklore around it, or is it legit haunted? Like, there was a lot along the way that was revealed that I did not predict, and I did not know what was happening. But the general ending I was not super happy with, because I did not feel like it gave you the closure you needed that was sufficient enough to like really close things up in ways that really tied everything in a nice, neat bow. The last book I'll be talking about, and the first one on my list, my ultimate fave that I read this summer, is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This book was so great, so fast-paced. The one book in the stack that I was just like ferociously reading. Hendrix did a really good job of creating a very diverse ensemble cast. But this book follows up on the lives of 4 or 5 final girls who have experienced immense tragedy and loss in their lives, and in some capacity they were able to defeat, or at least in that moment, the perpetrators of those crimes. It's a very graphic book. The reveal at the end isn't so revelatory. I think it was pretty predictable, and there were a lot of breadcrumbs that were left along the journey to get to that end point. So it does not feel like a huge reveal. Who is definitely, I could classify this as a horror novel, a slasher. And I'm not even the kind of person that purchases fiction books, let alone rereads them, but I think this is one that I definitely will revisit. The perpetrator, the villain at the end that is wreaking havoc in the lives of all of these final girls. Grady Hendrix is a very popular horror novelist, and I cannot wait for this to become a limited series. All right, well, I had a lot of fun tonight recapping what I read this summer. I'd love to know if you also had similar views on books that I reviewed here, but I would especially love to know if you thought a little bit different about these books. Also, let me know what you've been reading this summer, what you liked, what you didn't really care for. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye!